Hello, welcome to the Future Unemployed podcast. This is episode two, Literature Lore. My name is Ryan, and I'm here with Paula. And today we're going to be discussing the various kind of like aspects to getting into literature and reading in general, coming from the perspective of the younger generation that I think doesn't exactly talk about so much in terms of like the big picture of literature. Um and I'm joined here with Paula. And how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing okay for 1 a.m. But maybe let's first just do like a quick intro because we released the first episode and well, you guys don't know anything about us.
Hmm.
Our loyal three followers don't know anything about
Of
us.
course,
So
yeah, they're begging to know. They're begging to know. Uh,
so yeah, start please.
we're just international students. We live in Germany. However, neither of us are German. I'm American, and Paula is Polish Taiwanese. I'm gonna get into either living in one of those two areas.
For sure. So I guess the cultures, I mean, I lived in Poland, Taiwan, and now Germany. It's definitely interesting. I think in many ways, Europe and Asia are counterparts of
Hmm.
each other, especially East Asia and Western Europe, especially when it comes to work culture. But also, Taiwan is it's a very interesting place in Asia. Like, it is very westernized because of the American influence and all of that.
Hmm.
So, I guess I'm not also getting the full East Asian experience. Yeah, and what about you? How is your experience in living in Germany compared to living in Colorado?
I would say, I love Europe. I think it's definitely a lot of ways better. However, I don't think
He's
I
a
can.
Europhile.
I don't know if I can go exactly back on like turn my back completely against America. America has a lot of aspects I think that are neglected, but I think Europe in so many
Like
different
Lizzie.
factors. I don't even know if the living was that bad. Like if you lived in the middle of the country, there's a decent
Wait,
chance
sorry. You do know what I just said, right?
living.
Oh no, I said the glizzies.
What the fuck?
Because I saw a meme with like. Okay, anyways.
No, I know what a glizzy. Yes, it's New York hot dog.
Yeah, I saw that you can buy like 70 for like $3 and I don't remember what it was. Maybe Costco, honestly.
Probably, yeah. Uh, but yeah, no, I would say definitely the standard of living is a lot nicer here, in a lot of aspects. But I don't know. I think America is not as bad as a lot of these Europeans like to think. But today we're going to dive into some topics about literature, kind of like the big picture of it. That I don't think.
You want to get into literature if like you want to get into it because you've seen those low-key
Elitist.
elitist, thank you, videos on TikTok or something, or on Book Talk or whatever, that we're telling you to read something, but maybe that's not really your genre, not your style. So, we're here with some recommendations and
Uh,
whatnot.
but also we're here to talk about like just literature in terms of as a collective body. I think I think the youth doesn't talk about it too much. Of like if you were to really zoom out, like what we're reading as like a collective generation and what that means. Um,
Guys hit 18 and suddenly start saying the word youth.
I am the youth. What the fuck you mean?
That would be a really good place to put like a blooper sound.
No,
Wait,
we're
wait,
not
wait,
doing
wait.
sounds. We're not doing sounds.
No, we are doing sounds. Hold up.
I'm
Where's
editing the
my
video.
soundboard? No, please. I want my soundboard. Okay, it's not even working. Okay, so let's move on to something that is less yapping and more to the point. So I guess one of the biggest questions in literature in is classics versus modern literature, and what really is a classic to begin with.
Hmm. I What do you think a classic is? First, let's dissect what that means.
I think it's something. I think, in my opinion, a classic is something that everybody should have read. Or, like, not everybody, but, like, a
Really?
greater, like, people who are into literature should have read it.
I would just say a classic is
Like,
just
sorry. It's just important. It's an important piece of literature.
mm,
Like, very. Sorry, yeah?
I would say that a classic is I wouldn't necessarily stress like it's a significant piece. I would just say it's something that's old knowledge that we don't really consider so much anymore. So maybe like to put it in perspective, like I think like anything before like the 70s, I feel like that's a large shift in thought compared to how we think now. Um, like almost as a transition period. Um, and then of course I feel like when you say classics, no one's thinking like the book we just looked at, American Psycho. I feel like most people are thinking of Dostoevsky or Kafka or something along the lines, right?
Yes and no. So I guess the definition, I just searched it up because I was actually curious. From Oxford, the definition of classics is a work of art, so I guess also a book, of recognized and established value.
Mm,
I think we're both right, obviously, because I don't think like you can say, oh yeah, you're wrong because you have a different definition, because this term is very like it really depends on how you look at it. Um, but I do think that if someone wrote a book right now, that would be as sorry. Sorry.
bless you.
Um, I don't know if you could hear that, but yeah. Okay. I guess older works will have more value because I don't actually know.
I think that I don't know if you can apply this definition because I feel like what dictates a classic is more like a feeling and aesthetic. I feel like because now everything is like kind of tied to almost in a box, right? And I feel like classics are now put in a box where it's almost tied to yeah, a time period and like a way of thinking. Like
Hmm.
like less abstract, more traditional in
Would
thinking.
you say
Hmm?
would you say that American Psycho is a classic book?
No, I wouldn't. I would say it's definitely a modern book.
Okay.
What would you
Um,
classify it as?
for example, okay, what comes to my mind when you say classics is the Penguin Black Classics collection. Like
Mm,
it's those little black books. I have a couple of them because they were like €3 each.
hmm.
And I think that's a pretty good definition of classics. And most of them, yeah, most of them are probably older. Um,
But yeah,
so
but of
I
those,
guess for something, sorry, I was just gonna say, I guess for something to be established, it has to be a little bit older. Like
yeah,
in my opinion, American books like American Psycho, like the more prominent books that are like social commentaries on society right now, are like more modern or going to become classics in like 30 years. I can see that happening. Yeah.
I would agree. I think it's something to mark an era almost.
Yeah.
Um, and then I guess would you say there's a lot of value to like indulging in classics?
Well, it depends which ones, but in general, yes, I think so.
Hmm.
Because I think in order for a book to break through and become a classic, it has to be somehow socially significant. Like, I do think that literature in many ways either reflects, comments, criticizes, or like is a tool for spreading new ideas. But regardless, I do think in a way it's a response to the world, to the change, the shifts in ideologies, and such. So I think if something was relevant enough to become a classic, it still would be relevant enough today.
Even if it was like the Odyssey written, God knows
Yes.
when. Then
I
like,
think themes of literature, like they circulate.
mhm. Then like, if someone getting into it, what would you recommend then? Like a way to dive into these classics.
Ooh, okay. I mean, for me personally, what I found, I obviously haven't read all the classics, and I probably never will because some of them are quite frankly boring.
Yeah.
And I don't think they have that much value to my life. So I think the true way to, find books that you like is probably to follow, to get into a community. There's a lot of those like little slideshows, or like you can use your other forms of media to find books to read. Because that's low-key how I started getting really into reading. I mean, I always read books since I was an avid reader always,
hmm
but how I really found the books that interest me, they're mostly like niche. Like a lot of people know them, but only like a small group of people actually reads them for me personally. And I forgot where I was going with this thought. Hold up. Oh, good. Okay, sorry. Reset. So I think it's really helpful to use other forms of media to find books to read. So for me, how I really started getting into the specific niche of books that I like the most is honestly through memes. Like I would just see Instagram or TikTok memes, um, and I found them funny, and then I would get more and more of them, and then I would get like all of those Albert Camus and Franz Kafka videos. And slowly you can find your way there. Also, another thing that I really liked doing was on Pinterest. It is very corny. It is borderline cringe to do. However, it's very fun. And it helps you learn more about what you want from your books. So what I like to do is save quotes.
Mm.
And I guess another good place to do that is Goodreads. You can also find quotes there. You can find like books that other people like. Maybe that your friends even like. I like to sometimes piggyback off of my friends and what books they like to read because I would read the blurb and be like, yo, this is really interesting. Yeah.
That's really interesting to hear because I would say I had a very different way of getting introduced to them. Um,
Mhm.
since I've never been super into actually reading literature or fiction, I've always been obsessed with history. But what got me into it is seeing like some people I find interesting in history and what inspired them. So like more notably, like Trotsky was actually inspired by Leo Tolstoy a lot, and that's what got me to getting into reading him. Um, and a lot of famous authors, like Dostoevsky was big in Russian history relating to the Tsar, and that got me into reading some of Dostoevsky's work. Um, but and then of course too, like your friends are also a big way to get into this stuff. That's how I got into Murakami. Um, I guess he could be considered a classic. He's kind of on that border, would you say, right? Between like
Yeah,
classic and
yeah.
modern.
I also think he has a Nobel Prize long due, but that's a different story.
Yeah, definitely
Like
some
he's
wild
been
books.
writing wild books, but
Yeah.
that's good. And he's been writing for like 30 years, and he still doesn't know how to write a woman, but that's okay. It happens.
Um, yeah, definitely. I definitely would take Paula's advice and definitely find some friends or a community that are into it, a pre-existing one.
And I
Um,
think like your way also makes a lot of sense. Just you can use your other interests to find books that really interest you. Because for me, like I found like I guess a lot of the books that I read have feminist undertones, are very critical of certain systems, dystopian and such.
mhm.
Yeah.
It definitely, if you're
So
into politics, I mean,
yeah, exactly.
it's a gateway.
And psychology, all of them are gateways. If you're just into any humanities, and if you're into science, maybe science fiction would be for you.
Hmm.
Um,
I know Dune. I mean, of course, everyone knows it now because of the movie, but lot it's inspired a lot by like science fiction writers and people who are in STEM. I have a brother who's in engineering, and everyone's obsessed with Dune. And it's a revolutionary piece of literature. I've yet to read though, but I've heard
it
amazing things
seems
about it.
very long.
Oh yeah, there's like 8 books, and they're all like I don't know, 700 pages or something outrageous. Um,
Okay.
but now,
Well, anyway.
as someone you read mostly fiction, and I'm curious to hear, do you indulge in any nonfiction books or?
Yes, I definitely read a lot. Actually, recently I've been reading a lot of nonfiction. Um, I mean, our teacher gave us it was so kind, but I got a book from her and it's called The Stasiland, and yeah, I started reading it. It's very interesting. I actually really like reading journals, yeah, journals,
Mhm.
and diaries. So another book that non fiction that I've been reading recently is they said they wanted a revolution. It's about the Iranian revolution. And it's really, yeah. So I guess a lot of it would be historical that I read that is nonfiction. And I'm trying to get more into essays. So I was reading, I don't even know how to, it just says, it's titled, it's a Polish book. It's like mini essays, mini lectures about things. That's literally the title. And one more is on totalitarian. Wait, forgot the exact title, but it's Hannah Arendt. So yeah, it's philosophy. So yeah, history and philosophy are like the main two nonfiction branches I like to read.
Mhm.
Yeah, you read a lot of nonfiction though, right?
Yeah, I feel like I have a problem where I actually mostly read nonfiction, and I don't think I divulge enough into fiction. Um, I think usually people fall into one or the other, but I don't think most people realize the importance of like both. I think a lot of people see fiction as more fun, but I feel like it can actually I teach you a lot of things about empathy and morality that nonfiction can't exactly do.
Yeah, and
Uh,
also fiction is just a better tool in my opinion to tell stories usually because like your imagination can run wild. So it has more literary devices. It usually has more of a like a specific message that the author wants to give you, or I guess it's just more flexible.
mhm.
Yeah.
No, definitely
Plus, I also like poetry, which, well, Ryan doesn't just get. So.
disgusting. But I actually had talking about the classics. I actually had a debate in mind that I think we can get into. And what do you think of Kafka? Because I think he's the gateway drug that a lot of people look into through the that you mentioned the social media, through book TikTok and
Yes.
everywhere.
Um, he's definitely overly romanticized
Hmm.
by women, including myself. Um, Given that he frequented brothels and could never have a proper relationship with anybody.
Hmm.
But we can forgive some things. Honestly, when I was reading the Metamorphosis, like it's not bad. I'm reading it in German right now, and it's actually better in German. I'm
Oh, really?
surprised because my German is not that great, but so I do have to Google some words, but it's better in the original language. Um,
Because I would
which
say
one? Kafka.
I've read The
I don't know.
Trial and
Hmm.
I read The Metamorphosis, and I don't know. I would say he's overrated.
I think it's because his ideas are great. His writing style is not my favorite. It's a bit, I'll be very honest, it's a bit plain for me.
Hmm.
But his letters to Milena and his letters to his father are all, in my opinion, amazing. Like he has amazing penmanship.
Hmm. So, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not too familiar with that, but those were actually like his actual thoughts on paper, right? These weren't stories he made.
Yes.
This was to his
Yeah.
lover and his dad, right?
Yeah.
I don't,
Precisely.
yeah. I've seen some excerpts from it, so I don't doubt his ability to express himself, but I feel like him as a writer and storyteller, I feel like is certainly overplayed. Um,
I think once again, it's just a form. It's a cult of personality, really, because you have to take his story into consideration as well.
hmm,
It's very interesting. Like he worked, his work, like other than writing, because his writing wasn't his work. He didn't even want his work published. Like his
yeah.
friend did it posthumously,
Hmm,
post yeah,
uh,
post death.
okay.
But yeah, he represented the very dystopian, overly bureaucratic. Like these are all ideas that especially I think our generation is strongly against because we've seen how much it really hurts us and how annoying it is, quite frankly.
Hmm.
So I think it's just easy to idolize him. I don't think his writing is that great, but I think his ideas are very good and still sadly very relevant today. Like I think I really think all those people writing, I'm literally Gregor Samsa. Like I have the reasons to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's astonishing, really incredible to see the cultural impact it still has. Um, I think it's yeah, it's actually evolved past the classical. I think it's like because it's actually involved in memes and pop culture. I I don't know. It feels weird to call it a classic because it feels so relevant.
I mean, I think classics have to be relevant. Like otherwise, why would we read something that isn't relevant?
I guess, but I feel like sometimes I've read some iconic classics that just don't really, I don't know, hold a lot of substance, and you wonder why
I
it's so
think,
popular.
like for example, like even the Greek ones, like right now, some of the classics, like by actually this one is not Greek. This one I forgot which Greek author I was going to say, but Roman author like Marcus Aurelius with the rise of Stoicism, like it's becoming more and more important.
Hmm.
Um,
But I've
yeah,
read
and this,
I read books like The Cossacks by Leo Tolstoy, which I thought was an amazing book, but I didn't think it held much relevance to anything. It is considered one of his better books. Obviously, it's not as prestigious as like War and Peace, but it's still
I
considered a classic.
have no idea what the Cossacks are about. Well, I'm assuming it's about the Cossacks, but
Um, Maybe I can relate it. You've read White Knights. I haven't read White Knights yet, but you told me that
yeah.
it didn't really hold a lot of substance, or did.
Oh no, Red Knights does hold
Mm,
a lot of substance. It's just um it's actually right now I've seen it get talked about on a lot of forum online.
hmm.
It's a very good portrayal of I don't want to spoil it too much, so I'm just going to say unrequited love. Um but you have to dig a little into it. Actually, you don't. I don't know. I don't know how to put it, but it is relevant. It is definitely relevant
Hmm.
because a lot of people are relating to it nowadays. So,
I
and I
see.
think it's also because a lot of literature is around themes like love, like mental well-being, like money, all of that, or like money, or like systems of work or whatever. And
Hmm.
a lot of that, like the way we look at it changes over time, for sure, which is why we get a new perspective every time there's a shift in ideologies. But it's still the same thing over and over again, because I think those things are just an inherent thing that human beings care about, you know.
Yeah, but some like you've never seen a classic, and you're like, what the hell was the point of that? For example, like Macbeth. Like I understand the substance of the time and it as a literary work. Like it's important to appreciate like the foundations of English. But I feel like
I
no
think
one's
you're
relating
looking
to
too much into literature like you would look into history.
it. Hmm.
Like with literature, you also have to consider the cultural impacts of things. And
That's
in general, Shakespearean plays, I think, impacted especially the world of theater significantly. I mean, it's still being, played. Like people still love Macbeth. People still love things like books like Romeo and Juliet, Midsummer's Night. Like all of it is being still played, and people still watch it because people still find it relatable, because people still find it fun and interesting. I don't think the value of literature is just um it doesn't have to be that scholarly. Like literature is also meant to be for enjoyment after all.
I guess that's true. I'm applying a very rigid and subjective lens onto it, which is also why I probably don't mesh so well with poetry. But
Yeah.
I certainly see the point. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I think this poetry is more of an like it's the most artistic, I think, form of writing. So
mhm.
I think it might be a little difficult to measure it the same way.
Yeah. And so, would you recommend any classics for someone getting into it? Obviously, it should be specialized to whatever you want, but just off the bat,
Yeah,
if you had to say.
gateways. I'll be very honest. I think The Stranger by Albert Camus is a really good one. First of all, it's pretty short. So if you're just getting into it, like I think it's really nice, especially for me if I'm on a reader's block. Like I like to read something short to break it off and then start something long.
Hmm.
Um and I guess that book is significant because it just shows you, just reminds you of this crucial idea that in the grand scheme of things, nothing really matters that much. So you don't have to care that much. Like maybe if you decide to, I don't know, quit your job tomorrow and start the business, the bakery you've always wanted to open, like the world is not going to end.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's a very important mindset to have. That like I feel like people just get stressed from the everyday, and yeah.
Hmm. I would say probably it depends on your definition of a classic, but definitely a Murakami if you're into more wild stories. But he's on that borderline. Um, so,
If you're into magical realism, he's good.
oh yeah, no, definitely. Um, and then I would also say then I guess Leo Tolstoy or Anton Chernov would be good starts as well. They're because they have shorter books. I feel like a lot of
Wait, what did
times
you? Sorry, what did you read from Chernoff? I'm just curious. What
I
do you
read
read?
it was short stories on love.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, I haven't read it, but I've seen a lot of good things about it.
Yeah. They offer in Kafka. I would say, although I think he's overrated, he's certainly a good gateway. Get into it.
Or
Uh,
it might make you feel like you don't want to read classics anymore.
yeah, definitely. Um, and then one of our last topics here is reading is a superior form of media and obtaining knowledge. What do you think of that?
I think, yeah, I think it's a lot harder to spread misinformation through a book
Hmm.
than the internet.
I think it's something that we all take for granted. Like reading's a lot harder work than watching the news or YouTube video or TikTok. Um, I think it's pretty deeply concerning, in my opinion, of how much people are relying on the internet for information or just general fact, even not like big things, even like little things, like one news story. This facts can be stretched so easily versus like news articles and books. I feel like you could be checked on anything, so you have time to think and stop and look at the words, right?
Yes, and I think with reading, another thing is that it just shows you perspectives. Like, I think reading did kind of open my eyes. I think the first time I read Murakami, I was like, yo, I didn't even know you could look at the world like that.
Hmm.
Um, no, when I read Oh, a lot of the really eye-opening books for me were actually from Vietnamese refugees because for some reason, I don't know, I read two. One of them is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, and that one's actually like my favorite book ever, I think, because it mixes poetry with prose so well. He's a brilliant writer.
Mm.
But yeah, that and another, I think it was short stories and poetry, and that one I read when I was like in elementary school or something. But those were, I think, what opened my eyes to how different your life can be, how like the basic necessities, the things I would take for granted, are not necessarily somebody's um yeah, every day. And but another thing it also showed me was how similar emotions are. Like even though obviously the anguish of losing your country is different than anything I have ever felt, but how it's actually universal to feel certain ways.
Mm.
Homesick, all of that. So I think yeah, once again, literature just opens your eyes to how many different ways you can look at something. And I think, sorry, yeah?
I was gonna say, yeah, empathy and sympathy.
Yeah, exactly. It teaches you empathy and it teaches you, I think, critical thinking skills, which is something that I think, especially with how we're bombarded with media nowadays, we just slowly are staying away from, you know, straying away from.
I mean, definitely. I think especially like being able to read it, you could see both sides versus I feel like it's very easy to get sucked into one-sided narratives nowadays. No matter what it is. It could be politics, it could just be just about general philosophy and ideas. Um,
Could be pop culture, could be people.
yeah. And I think reading, because also just the act itself, like, yeah, you get to stop, you get to think after you're done reading, you were kind of part of the whole journey, to say, right? The whole story, you were there
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah.
And you always have to stop and think. You're never like, it's never fast, kind of like, oh, here's the next TikTok, here's the next news story, here's the next movie or the next trailer. It's more
Yeah.
meditative.
Yeah. You have to think.
Hmm.
That's the bottom line, I think.
Yeah. And finally, why we started this podcast and a big reason behind it, the motive behind it, is in order to spread literacy. And so we can talk about this, and so more people our age and throughout the world have the opportunity to talk like this.
Exactly. Like we just want to make reading cool again, honestly. But illiteracy is a huge issue in the world. And we're not just talking about media literacy, which we have been talking about quite a bit in this episode, but quite literally, people cannot read. According to UNESCO, it's about 773 million people, adults, that are still unable to read. Sorry, wait, I lost my train of thought. Um, yeah, just cut this part out. I'll start again.
Mm,
So actually, media illiteracy is not the only issue, because actual illiteracy still affects about 773 million adults worldwide, according to UNESCO right now, which is why we would like to promote an organization called Room to Read, and that is what partially inspired us to start this podcast. So this is a group that especially targets children, especially girls, because the illiteracy rates between girls and boys, well, the girls have much higher illiteracy rates, and gender equality is something that this organization works towards. What they mainly do is they train teachers in the respective countries. So they work in plenty of countries around the world, from US to India, um, Bangladesh, the Philippines, I think Kenya as well, plenty of places around the world. About 35.5 million children have benefited from the literacy program, and they have over 182,000 of program schools all around the world. So their mission is something that we definitely would like to support. What they mainly do is, yeah, they train teachers in those countries. They provide reading materials. They provide schooling materials. Also, occasionally fundraisers for the facilities so that people can go to school. And yeah, just this is a cause to keep in mind if you would like to donate somewhere, I think.
Yes. We'll have the link in the description and we'll try to see. We have to figure it out, but the YouTube should have kind of like this coordination thing where you can donate directly through YouTube to this organization. Please do. It is very beneficial, and it's one of the main factors why we're doing this is because we want to.
To, read in general.
Mhm.
And if you can see, we linked their website. It's very, in my opinion, transparent. You can learn about how you can support them in other ways than donations, as well as you can see the impact that they have on communities around the world.
Great. Thank you so much.
And that's it for tonight.
Thank you for
Thank
listening.
you.